The rediscovery of hidden teachings attributed to Jesus has become one of the most transformative revelations of our time, not because it changes the figure of Jesus himself, but because it changes our understanding of what his message truly was. For centuries, the narrative of Jesus' life and words has been shaped by a selective collection of texts chosen by councils and institutions that sought to define faith in a specific way. What most people do not realize is that many other writings existed, texts that were once considered sacred, then later declared heretical or unfit for the official canon. These include the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip, and fragments of wisdom found in the Nag Hammadi Library and the Dead Sea Scrolls. When scholars and explorers began uncovering these ancient manuscripts in the deserts of Egypt and the caves near Qumran, a new dimension of Jesus' teachings began to emerge, one that speaks directly to the heart of human consciousness and spiritual empowerment rather than to external systems of belief. In these rediscovered texts, Jesus is not portrayed as a distant savior demanding worship, but as a living example of what it means to realize divine potential within oneself. His words in these writings suggest that the same creative force that moved through him is also within every human being. He speaks not of hierarchy, but of harmony, not of dogma, but of direct experience. When he says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you," he is revealing a profound truth about the nature of reality, that everything we seek outside ourselves already exists in the depths of our being. This vision is radically different from the version of Christianity that later developed through the lens of institutional control. It suggests that Jesus' mission was not to establish a religion, but to awaken humanity to its own divine consciousness. The rediscovery of these texts challenges centuries of interpretation and invites us to look beyond tradition to the essence of the teachings themselves. It also highlights how history, power, and politics influenced what humanity was allowed to remember and what it was told to forget. For generations, the Church curated which texts would define Christianity, often with good intentions, but also within the context of maintaining order and authority. The result was that many of the mystical and psychological dimensions of Jesus' message were silenced. Yet, time has a way of revealing what is meant to be known. The emergence of the lost Gospels during the 20th century coincided with a period in which humanity began searching again for meaning beyond institutional boundaries. Science was beginning to uncover the power of thought and emotion to influence the physical world, and ancient spiritual traditions were being re-examined through the lens of consciousness studies. Into this atmosphere, the rediscovered teachings of Jesus arrived like a missing piece of a much larger puzzle, bridging ancient spirituality with modern understanding. These writings present a Jesus who teaches that each person has the ability to shape their reality through the alignment of heart and mind. He speaks of the kingdom of heaven not as a distant place beyond death, but as a state of awareness that can be accessed in this very moment. The divine, he suggests, is not somewhere else. It is the very essence of our being, waiting to be remembered. Such ideas resonate deeply with both mystical traditions and quantum science, both of which affirm that consciousness is not separate from creation but integral to it. When we rediscover these teachings, we begin to see that what was once removed was not merely words, but an entire worldview. The Jesus revealed through these ancient writings is not the distant, untouchable figure depicted by doctrine, but a teacher who sought to remind humanity of its own sacred nature. His miracles, rather than being supernatural exceptions, become demonstrations of what is possible when one lives in full coherence with the heart, mind, and his compassion is not an act of divine superiority, but a reflection of unity consciousness. The understanding that to love another is to love oneself, because all life is connected through the same field of existence. The rediscovery of these texts also reveals the feminine aspect of the teachings that was long suppressed. In writings such as the Gospel of Mary, we find an intimate portrayal of spiritual partnership and mutual understanding between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, emphasizing balance between the masculine and feminine principles of creation. This inclusion restores the wholeness of the message, showing that true enlightenment arises from harmony, not dominance. As we explore these rediscovered words, it becomes clear that their power lies not in theological debate, but in personal transformation. They call each of us to an inner journey, to remember the creative force that lives within our thoughts, emotions, and choices. They remind us that faith is not blind belief, but the act of aligning with the field of infinite possibility that exists within us and around us. This rediscovery also invites humility. It asks us to acknowledge that our understanding of spiritual truth has been filtered through centuries of translation, interpretation, and omission. The purpose of uncovering the lost texts is not to condemn the past, but to complete the picture. It is to weave back into the tapestry of humanity the threads of wisdom that were once cut away. When we see the fullness of Jesus' message, when we integrate both the canonical and the lost writings, we begin to perceive the coherence of his vision, a vision of empowered, compassionate beings who live in conscious union with creation. What makes these rediscovered teachings so relevant today is their direct resonance with the challenges of our world. We are living in a time when external systems, political, economic, religious, are being questioned, and people are seeking truth from within. The words found in the deserts thousands of years ago speak directly to this moment. They remind us that the real revolution begins not in institutions, but in consciousness. They invite us to remember that peace, healing, and transformation do not come from waiting for something outside to change, but from awakening the power already present within the human heart. The rediscovery of hidden teachings is therefore not merely an archaeological event. It is a spiritual awakening for the collective soul of humanity. It tells us that what was lost can be found again, not only in ancient manuscripts, but in the silence of our own awareness. Every time we remember that the kingdom of heaven is within, we participate in the very act of rediscovery. Every time we choose compassion over fear, we bring those lost words back to life. In this sense, the hidden teachings of Jesus were never truly removed. They were waiting beneath the surface of history, waiting within the human spirit, waiting for the moment when humanity would be ready to remember. That moment is now. The concept of the kingdom within is one of the most profound and misunderstood ideas to emerge from the rediscovered words of Jesus. Throughout centuries, this phrase has been interpreted as a distant promise, a realm to be entered only after death, a reward granted by divine judgment. Yet, in the ancient writings that resurfaced from the sands of Egypt and the caves near the Dead Sea, this idea takes on an entirely different meaning, one that shifts the focus from heaven as a destination to heaven as a state of consciousness. When Jesus speaks of the kingdom being within, he is not describing a physical place, but an inner realization of unity with the divine. He is pointing to a truth that transcends religion, that the essence of creation and the spark of divinity reside inside every human being. This awareness changes everything because it transforms the relationship between humanity and the divine from one of dependency to one of partnership. It reveals that the connection to God is not something that must be earned through suffering or obedience, but something that already exists in every heartbeat, every breath, and every thought aligned with love. To understand this teaching is to recognize that what we call heaven is not something to be reached through death, but something to be awakened to in life. The rediscovered texts show that Jesus consistently invited people to look inward rather than upward, to seek truth not in temples or rituals, but in the quiet space of the heart. He spoke of a divine field that connects all living things, an awareness that can be felt when one silences the noise of fear and separation. This awareness is what he called the kingdom of heaven, a realm of coherence where thought, emotion, and creation move as one. In this state, miracles are not violations of natural law, but expressions of harmony with it. The moment a person realizes this inner kingdom, they begin to live from a place of knowing rather than believing. They no longer search for God outside themselves, but experience divinity through every act of compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. This realization is what transforms ordinary life into sacred life. The Lost Gospels describe this process not as an abstract philosophy, but as a living practice. Jesus taught that the kingdom within can be accessed through feeling rather than intellect. He spoke of aligning heart and mind so completely that the barrier between the human and the divine dissolves. This is why he often withdrew into silence or solitude, to remind his followers that communion with the divine happens not through words, but through stillness and awareness. The kingdom within is not hidden. It is simply overlooked because human consciousness has been trained to look outward for meaning, approval, and salvation. The rediscovered teachings challenge this outward orientation and call humanity back to the original truth of inner knowing. When one realizes the kingdom within, the world itself begins to change. Outer circumstances start to reflect the harmony already established inside. Fear gives way to trust, competition transforms into cooperation, and division yields to unity. This is not idealism. It is the natural consequence of consciousness creating reality. In the language of both ancient mystics and modern science, coherence within the observer creates coherence in the observed world. In other words, peace within becomes peace without. The rediscovery of this teaching also redefines prayer and faith. Prayer is no longer seen as asking a distant deity for intervention, but as attuning oneself to the frequency of what is already true in the higher reality of the kingdom. When a person feels peace, love, and gratitude as though their prayer has already been answered, they are not pretending, they are activating the very vibration that draws that reality into manifestation. Faith, then, becomes not a passive waiting, but a conscious participation in creation. This teaching, when understood deeply, reveals the incredible power of human consciousness. It shows that humanity was never meant to live in separation from the divine, but as extensions of it. The inner kingdom is the meeting point between the seen and the unseen, where the infinite intelligence of creation expresses itself through the individual. It is the realization that we are not merely observers of life, but instruments through which life itself is expressed. This awareness was revolutionary 2,000 years ago, and it remains revolutionary today because it dissolves the need for external control or mediation between the individual and the divine. Institutions built upon fear and hierarchy have little place in a world where every individual recognizes their direct access to the sacred. This is why such teachings were suppressed for centuries. They empower the individual to live in self, realize divinity rather than dependency. Yet the truth has a way of resurfacing, and now it comes to us at a time when humanity is once again seeking connection amid fragmentation. The kingdom within is not an escape from the world, but the foundation for transforming it. When a person remembers that divinity lies within them, they naturally see that same divinity in others. Judgment fades, compassion expands, and a collective shift begins to unfold. This is how the world heals, not through external force, but through internal awakening. The rediscovered teachings also illuminate the depth of responsibility that comes with this realization. To know that the kingdom of heaven is within is to understand that every thought and emotion contributes to the collective field of humanity. We are constantly creating, whether consciously or unconsciously. The more we live in alignment with love, the more we harmonize with the original blueprint of creation. This was the essence of Jesus' message, an invitation to live as conscious creators, aware that the world we perceive is a mirror of our inner state. He knew that true transformation does not begin with systems or laws, but with the heart of the individual. When the heart remembers its connection to the kingdom, every action that follows becomes an act of creation rooted in divine purpose. What makes this teaching timeless is its simplicity. It does not require ceremony or theology. It only asks for awareness. The kingdom within can be accessed in a moment of gratitude, a deep breath, a silent prayer, or a simple act of kindness. It is always present, always available, waiting for recognition. The rediscovered words remind us that humanity's greatest task is not to build a stairway to heaven, but to realize that heaven has been within us all along. When this realization becomes collective, the world itself begins to reflect that awareness through peace, balance, and harmony. The rediscovery of this truth is not merely an ancient revelation. It is the blueprint for humanity's next evolution. As we awaken to the kingdom within, we awaken to the fact that divinity is not somewhere else waiting to be found. It is the very essence of who we are. When we rediscover the ancient teachings of Jesus, one of the most striking revelations is his description of prayer, not as a plea to an external power, but as a sacred technology of emotion and consciousness. In the text long hidden from the public, Jesus reveals a way of communicating with the divine that is deeply experiential rather than verbal or ritualistic. He does not teach that we must beg, convince, or bargain with God to receive what we desire. Instead, he shows that the key lies in feeling as though the prayer has already been answered. This principle transforms prayer from an act of separation to an act of unity, where the individual aligns their emotional state with the reality they wish to experience. In these lost words, Jesus speaks of the power of coherence, of uniting thought, emotion, and belief into a single vibration that resonates with creation itself. He explains that when the heart and mind are in alignment, they become the language through which the universe responds. Modern science now echoes this idea, showing that the heart generates a powerful electromagnetic field that affects not only our bodies but the world around us. 2,000 years ago, Jesus described this same phenomenon in the language of spirit, teaching that the feeling of gratitude, love, and certainty is the bridge between thought and manifestation. When he prayed, he did not ask for rain, he felt the rain. He did not request healing, he embodied the wholeness that already existed in the higher realm of truth. His prayer was not spoken in words, but in vibration, emotion, and trust. The rediscovered teachings make it clear that prayer is not about sending a request upward to be heard by a distant deity, but about creating harmony between our inner state and the greater field of creation. When we feel peace within, we draw peace into the physical world. When we feel compassion, healing flows naturally through us and extends to those around us. This is why Jesus often said that faith, even the size of a mustard seed, could move mountains. He was not speaking in metaphor, but describing the actual power of consciousness when it is aligned with divine emotion. The lost text suggests that emotion is the technology of creation, the way consciousness communicates with the fabric of reality. Every feeling we generate sends a signal into the unified field, shaping the possibilities that return to us. Fear, doubt, and anger create dissonance, while love, gratitude, and peace create coherence. The early church may have struggled to include such ideas because they placed divine authority directly in the hands of individuals, not institutions. If people understood that they could create and heal through the alignment of their inner world, the need for mediation between humanity and God would dissolve. This teaching, therefore, was not merely spiritual, it was revolutionary. It offered a path to empowerment through the mastery of emotion and awareness. The rediscovery of this form of prayer is deeply relevant today because humanity is once again learning to understand consciousness as a creative force. Science has shown that observation itself influences physical reality, that energy responds to attention, and that emotion amplifies intention. These discoveries confirm what Jesus demonstrated through his actions and teachings, that human beings are not passive observers but active participants in creation. When we pray from a state of lack or desperation, we affirm that lack as our reality. When we pray from a state of fulfillment, gratitude, and peace, we align with the frequency of our desired outcome. This is the essence of what Jesus meant when he said, "Believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." He was not instructing blind faith, but conscious alignment with the feeling of already having what we seek. In this sense, prayer becomes a creative act, a spiritual technology that transcends time and distance. The rediscovered teachings emphasize the role of emotion as the language of the heart, while thought is the language of the mind. When the two speak together in coherence, creation responds. Jesus taught his followers to pray in this coherent state, to feel deeply, to visualize with love, and to embody the outcome before it appeared in the physical world. This approach to prayer dissolves the illusion of separation between human beings and the divine. It reveals that creation is not something that happens to us, but something that happens through us. The feeling is the prayer, the emotion is the communication. Every time we feel love, peace, or gratitude, we are already praying in the most ancient and powerful way. The rediscovered writings also show that Jesus viewed the heart as the seat of creation, not merely a symbol of compassion. He understood that the heart is capable of generating measurable energy fields that influence matter, and he taught that emotion, especially the emotion of love, is the bridge between the human and the divine. By cultivating this state, individuals could heal themselves and others, restore balance to their surroundings, and connect directly with the creative intelligence of the universe. When people witnessed Jesus perform miracles, what they saw was not supernatural intervention, but natural law expressed through conscious mastery. He showed that when one's emotional and mental states are aligned with divine will, creation flows effortlessly. The rediscovery of these teachings challenge